Hi, everyone, and welcome to Live with the League. I'm Emily Kalashevsky, Assistant Director of Member Experience and Learning here at the League. Thanks for joining us on this lovely Monday. As always, we're here to give you the latest updates on legislative activity in Lansing and share resources and tools to support your work in local government. We've got a great show lined up today with two segments. First, we'll be joined by Shanna Draheim and Danielle Baird from our Policy Research Labs team to talk about technical assistance opportunities available to your communities at no cost. Then we'll bring in Harrisana Richards and Dave Hodgkins from our State and Federal Affairs team for a roundup of legislative developments, including early movement on the state budget, energy legislation, and more. Feel free to drop your questions in the chat. We'll answer as many as we can during the show. Let's get right into it. Shanna, Danielle, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, we're excited to be here.
We know that local leaders are juggling a lot right now, of course, and one of the ways we try to make things easier is by connecting communities to free technical assistance and other programs that support long-term sustainability and innovation. Can you start by giving us a quick overview of the two programs your team is currently helping to roll out, EV Smart Communities and Energy Navigators?
Yeah, I'll give a little bit of a background on it, and then we have a couple slides we'll show you on each of them to give everybody a little more in-depth detail. But I'll start by just saying we at the League have partnered with an organization out of Minnesota called the Great Plains Institute for many years on some of our sustainability efforts, including our Migraine Communities program, which hopefully many of you already know about and are participants in. They run a similar program for the Minnesota communities and are part of a national network of states that offer that. And so we've partnered on several different things, and for the last few years, we've been partnering with them around some programming on clean energy related topics and program offerings, including EV Smart and readiness programs, and then more recently, this energy navigation program that Danielle's going to talk a little bit about. So these are, as you said, Emily, two free technical assistance programs that they want our communities in Michigan to benefit from. So, and we do too. So yeah, we're gonna hopefully share a little bit of that information and then get you guys excited to jump in.
Excellent. Well, I love free, and I'm sure many others out there do as well. Danielle, let's get into it. Walk us through this.
All right, thanks so much. So, like Shanna said, we are partnering with the Great Plains Institute, and just a little bit about, we call them GPI for short. So it's a nonpartisan nonprofit organization based in Minnesota that's been working for over 25 years to create a better energy system in the Midwest. By better, we mean more resilient, more reliable, and cleaner. They bring together diverse stakeholders to develop practical, real-world solutions that reduce carbon emissions while supporting economic growth and community well-being. So the Energy Navigators program that I'm going to be talking about comes actually from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, or NREL for short, and it's designed to help communities that are experiencing energy resilience challenges, whether that's due to their coastal, remote, or island geography, aging infrastructure, and exposure to harsh weather conditions, among other considerations. For this program, it is, like I said, free technical assistance, and I'll dive into some examples in just a couple moments. The lead applicant for it has to be either a local government, a tribe, or a tribal organization, community-based organization, including nonprofits and NGOs. It could be a special purpose district, so like a school district, water district, sewer district, municipal utility, or a utility co-op. So through this program, eligible communities and organizations can receive between 10 and 40 hours of free TA to support clean energy planning and implementation. So the assistance is hands-on and tailored to your needs, and it might include things like identifying funding sources, conducting feasibility studies, or just helping you scope out a project. The goal is to really help build capacity at the local level and be better prepared for future funding opportunities and project implementation. So some of the navigation support that you can expect to receive would be like technical navigation support, meaning support that can help you answer questions like, what do we need to reach our community's goals? What is the right goal for our community? Resource navigation support. So meaning GPI can actually help identify what funding, financing, or other assistance programs are available to help you reach your goals. And then implementation support. So GPI can help with breaking things down step by step to reach your community's goals and help guide you through the process. So just some quick examples of those would be like energy planning, feasibility assessments, funding ID, project scoping, and project implementation guidance. And then once the technical assistance is complete, you'll be connected with additional resources to programs that can help you take the next steps. So I'll give a couple more detailed examples, and then I'll talk about a little bit about like what the process is that you can expect for participating in this program. So let's say that a township wanted to start energy planning but didn't know where to begin. Through Energy Navigators, GPI could help them collect and organize data on their buildings and operations, and then help prioritize buildings for energy efficiency upgrades and understand what information they need to move forward. Another example, let's say a city wants to install solar and battery storage at community center. GPI has access to modeling tools that can help determine the optimal system size based on their goals and budget. And so a question that I often get asked by local governments is, we want to explore solar or renewables or energy efficiency improvements. And we also want somebody though who can provide that analysis who isn't also trying to sell us anything. Where can I find somebody that can do that? And so this is a really great example of an opportunity where it's free and you can do just that. They can actually help you with that analysis, and GPI isn't actually the one that's trying to sell you on the solar or batteries or anything like that. They're not trying to sell you on any equipment. They are just there to provide this TA through funding from the federal government. So what to kind of expect? Here's how the process would work. First, your community would just express interest. You can just either you can email me or Great Plains Institute directly. My contact information is going to be at the end of this presentation. And then our project manager over there at GPI is Sydney Tursky. She's wonderful. She's helped with a couple of projects here at the league in the past. Really love working with her. And she's going to set up a screening call with you, discuss your needs, and then she'll go back and work with her team to determine, if that what you're looking for aligns with the program and the goals and whatnot. GPI is going to then draft a scope of work, and then MREL is going to just review and approve that. Once they sign off, Sydney will work with you to finalize that scope. And then GPI will provide that technical assistance between August and December of this year. So we really want people to kind of, express their interest by early July to let them know that you're interested. And then afterwards, you just complete a brief wrap-up form and you'll be referred to additional programs to help you from there. This is something too where you'll have a couple conversations with GPI, but then they're going to go and do the work, right? They're going to go and do that technical assistance work and bring back the recommendations and reports to you. So it can really be a really good capacity boost for local governments. And even if Energy Navigators is not the right program for your community, Shanna's going to talk about the EV Charging Smart program now.
Thanks,
You mind,
Danielle.
before we get on to that,
Yeah, of course.
I just have a question, Danielle. Can this program be used to review and amend ordinances related to clean energy?
I believe so. I would certainly, if you're interested, shoot me a quick email and I'll get you connected with Sydney. I'd be happy to talk about that.
Thanks. All right, let's get into Charging Smart, Shanna.
Yeah. And there's a lot of similarities. And I think the theme you're going to hear from us is, trying to help fill in gaps in capacity, because we know for a lot of you, these are kind of priority either for sustainability reasons, often for cost reasons, saving money on energy costs and whatnot. But in the slew of things you are all dealing with on a day-to-day basis, these things can sometimes get kicked down the can of the to-do list. So the idea is to try to really help supplement some of that capacity and get some of this done. So Charging Smart, we have worked with GPI actually on this program for a couple of years. So we have a few communities who've already gone through cohorts on this. But in the last year, GPI with Department of Energy and other national partners have finally finalized this Charging Smart program, which is not only a technical assistance program, but it's a certification program. Again, if you're familiar with our Michigan Green Communities program, similar. So education, information, technical assistance, and then ideally going through a certification process. So as with the Energy Navigators, GPI is providing that free technical assistance. They have a large network of national partners who are involved in this. And then they have industry representatives. So think some of the leading, Electrify America, ChargeSmart, ChargePoint, and others who are helping to advise on that. And for similar reasons, like how can you as a community think about your EV charging policies, your needs, without feeling like you have to start that off by getting involved with a consultant or a company who's trying to charge you something. So next slide, Daniel. This program is modeled off Soul Smart, which is a national certification program as well. If anybody's familiar with that, we have several communities in Michigan that were designated Soul Smart communities, and they modeled it in the same way. So very simple, low bar of, kind of process to do this, similar with our Michigan Green Communities program. So, things. So basically, the Charging Smart, there are 6 different action categories where there is both resources and information and tools available, and then the assessment in these 6 different categories. So things around, planning, long-term planning, including both financial and kind of site and other planning. Then there's regulation. So in answer to that last question, same applies here. Yes, like what is a potential ordinance, ordinances that you could use that would support acceleration of EV deployment, both, at the residential and at the commercial level. Model ordinances are available. So it's like, take what's worked in other places, adapt it to your community, tweak it a little, but there's a whole host of resources that can literally be kind of plug and played. Utility engagement is a big part of this because obviously as we're adding all this charging infrastructure, there are, grid and utility connection issues. So same, they can help kind of coach you through how to work with your utility, what your needs are for getting that information, what are some models that have worked for other municipal utility partnerships, that kind of stuff. And then education and incentives. What are you doing, within your community to help them understand the opportunities for EV charging? Shared mobility. How are you incorporating other parts of this? E-bikes, other, public transportation and things like that. And then your own government operations. What does your fleet look like? And so across all of these, there are tools that you can use, to do, for example, a fleet assessment. What's there? What's your timing? What would it look like to add EVs and on what time frame? And what are the cost implications of that? So I was trying to forward that. There you go. So there are 3 designation levels for Charging Smart: bronze, silver, and gold. And designation of those is really dependent on how many actions you take. They're points based. For even the most basic bronze, you have to take actions across a couple different of those 6 areas. You don't have to have actions in all 6 to get the initial certification. But basically, the more you are doing, the higher level of certification. And like Green Communities, you could come in and be certified as bronze, but over time, as you add more actions and you kind of take more steps on this front, then you can recertify at higher levels. So there's a picture here. They have a program guide, which I can happily share with anybody who's interested. As I mentioned, there's, guidebooks, there's templates for contracts, there's model language, and it's really tailored to kind of support communities at all levels. So if you are really just starting to think about this, you haven't done anything in your community, or maybe you've got a public charger, or maybe a couple of your private commercial spaces have that, and you're just really trying to wrap your hands around it, great. Come in, get some of this assistance. They can help you kind of map some of that out. If you're further along and you're really trying to figure out, how to maximize some of this acceleration, within your residential community, or how do you tackle some of the bigger challenges like multifamily residential, great. They can help you kind of set some goals and have the tools you need to do that. And I would just say specifically kind of addressing some of the critical concerns. So land use and zoning regulation, permitting, kind of how can you make that easy and straightforward? for people who want to do EV charging in your community. And there's a lot of benefits to it. So we mentioned this, and we'll just kind of keep hitting it. The idea is really to help augment some staff capacity and also to help connect you with potential funding resources so they can, kind of in partnership with our My Funding Hub, help look for potential funding sources for some of this, but even just help you internally look at your own budgets and what does that look like. Try to get rid of unnecessary barriers. Your current zoning ordinance might be impeding acceleration of EV deployment now, and you don't even realize it. And then I would just also say, being kind of noted as a leader in this. Increasingly, the companies who are out looking for sites to deploy, particularly in fast charging networks and things like that, they're really wanting to see communities that have taken some of these steps, because that's part of their market analysis as well, right? Not only what is the traffic and what is the charging, but what is that, like, what does the process look like to come into your community? So trying to reduce some of those barriers and really signal that you're a leader in this area is also a great benefit of the program. Both of our emails are there. And what I would just say, and I'll let Danielle wrap up with a few closing thoughts too that she might have, is we're partnering with GPI. We're trying to kind of help make that connection because, we know you know us. And so we're happy to answer questions first. If you want to shoot us an email, before you kind of jump in and say, oh yeah, I want to reach out to GPI. I did not have a slide on mine for process, but the process on the EV is similar to the Energy Navigators, but it's a little less intense one-on-one consulting. It's some of that. You'll do some assessment with them. They'll help walk you through a self-assessment to see where you currently shake out on the certification, and then kind of map out some steps. There are educational webinars you can participate in. It's a bit more of a cohort model, so peer-to-peer learning. If you want to know what one of your fellow communities has done in there, you can, be connected with them to see what their ordinances look like, that kind of thing. So what else, Danielle? What am I forgetting? And then Emily, what questions do you have?
I think you kind of captured everything, but yeah, I would say the other thing I would just say is, any questions that are related to sustainability, energy, things like that, just reach out to us as well. We're happy to talk about it, whether it's related to these programs or not. We're happy to talk. Yeah,
Danielle is our coordinator for the Michigan Green Communities Program. And if any of you are not yet participating in that, it's just she's such a great resource and, superstar sustainability human. So if you just have questions, big or small, for sure.
Well, I think you all have covered these programs sort of in their entirety, and I love that our members can reach out directly to you to get connected with these resources. I think sometimes the first step in figuring out who to contact is always the most difficult and feels most arduous. So I love that we can help make those connections and facilitate that process a little bit. But I know you mentioned the Michigan Green Communities Challenge, which I think for the folks that know it and participate in it, they're huge fans, but it feels a little bit like an unsung hero sometimes, in the sense that, I don't remember the last time we've talked about the Michigan Green Communities Challenge here for this audience. So Danielle, could you just mention briefly what the program is and what it does for folks who might be interested in that?
Yeah, absolutely. So Michigan Green Communities, or MGC for short, it's an entirely free and voluntary program for local governments in Michigan to use the Michigan Green Communities Challenge, which is like a benchmarking tool. There's a whole list of action items that really span, they run the gamut of all local government operations, whether it's things related to water, mobility, energy, planning and zoning, economic development, and how you can really just embed sustainability into your operations. So it provides a really good roadmap for local governments who are looking to pursue sustainability, kind of broadly, or maybe they have some ideas, but they're not really sure what the next steps are. That program really provides a good roadmap forward for any local government in Michigan. The program too, it's administered by the Michigan Municipal League, but we partner with EGLE, MDOT, DNR, MDHHS, and MEDC on this program, as well as the Township Association and the Association of Counties. So any local government in Michigan can participate in it. They don't necessarily have to be a league member. But it opens you up to like free technical assistance opportunities, peer learning cohorts. And this year we actually had record participation for the second year in a row. We had 68 local governments participate, and just shy of 5.6 million Michiganders live in those governments. So in the jurisdiction of those local governments. So really happy to see the program continue growing. And like I said, I'm happy to answer questions about that or sustainability more broadly. Just reach out. We're happy to help in any way we can.
Well, thank you so much. An incredible resource from our policy research and labs team, both with these two technical assistance programs that you talked about today and the Michigan Green Communities Challenge. We'll make sure to link both of those programs. I think they already are linked in the chat for those tuning in, and Danielle and Shanna's email addresses. We'll put those in the chat too in case you missed those on the slide. Thank you so much, Danielle and Shanna.
Thank you guys. Thanks. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
All right, now we're going to shift gears and bring in Harrisana Richards and Dave Hodgkins from our state and federal affairs team to break down some key developments happening in Lansing. Let's start with budget news. It's the gift that keeps on giving, the topic that keeps on topicking. Dave, what can you tell us about that, especially around the education budget?
Yeah, so I mean, I think everybody's kind of interested to see what happens this week, coming off of a week that was particularly light last week with House Republicans being in DC. So I think what you're going to see is a continuation of closed door conversations. We do know that Speaker of the House Matt Hall, Senate Majority Leader Winnie Brinks, and the governor all met last week trying to hash out the finer details of the education budget. They also talked about transportation. There's some progress that's been made on both fronts, though I will say the proposals are still very drastically apart from each other. So they're playing this a little bit close to the vest right now. Like I said, all eyes are on this week. Next week, July 1st, is that statutory deadline for budgets to be passed. I will say that no one really expects the omnibus, the bigger, broader, all-encompassing bill to really make much progress by that point. But Speaker Hall has stated that he is going to make a good faith effort to try and get at least the education component wrapped up by July 1. I'll also point out that I think it's interesting too that the Senate's not scheduled for more than really a handful of days following this week throughout the summer. The House is scheduled to go for a pretty good block of days, session days throughout the summer. But we do expect those budget conversations to obviously continue. So the Senate's lighter schedule is subject to change depending on what kind of compromises can be made at any point really over the next couple of months.
Sure. So another sort of stay tuned and see what happens as things develop in the next couple of weeks. Dave, there's also been some movement on minimum staffing legislation, another topic that seems to keep coming up. That obviously could impact local government operations. Can you give us a quick update on that as well?
Yeah, so Senate Bill 319, this is a reintroduction of the minimum staffing bill from last year, last session, that would require minimum staffing levels for all PA 312 employees to be a mandatory topic of collective bargaining. So your police and your firefighters, essentially. And there's a provision in there that also includes a one-year look back that says if local governments had property tax values or sales tax values decreased, that topic could then be a permissible during the collective bargaining process. From our perspective, that's really a do-nothing amendment because, that collective bargaining agreements tend to be multi-year and you don't really plan your fiscal budgets out just 1 year at a time. It's a multi-year process. It's very complex. So that's not really a compromise on our front. The legislation did come out of committee on party lines a couple weeks ago. It is currently on the House floor. We haven't heard definitively yet, but I would not be surprised if the Senate did try and put that through this week before they go on break for the summer. I will say that the House is not going to be as receptive to that. That's not to say that we don't have a lot of work to do there, and certainly we'll be reaching out to our membership to engage when the time is right. But it is a little bit different from last session where you had a more favorable majority. And this time around, I think that they're going to have a bit of an uphill climb there for the minimum staffing legislation, at least over on the House side.
Thanks for that update, Dave. Harrisana, turning to you, tipping fee legislation could be in the Senate as soon as this week. What's the latest there?
Well, things have been moving quickly, Emily. So Senate Bills 246 and 247 are two high priority issues for us. They combine the hazardous waste issue and details about how we are going to improve dumping around significantly hazardous waste and T-norm, a particular type of hazardous waste. And there's some fees included as an fee increase included in there, which takes us to the solid waste surcharge, which is also included in this legislation as well. So we've been watching both issues within this piece of legislation. And just last week, the bills had a hearing that moved them out of Senate committee with an S1 substitute. So big changes for us in this one. It established a mechanism that would provide money going back to all of our local units of government, almost all of them, cities and townships. We anticipate that there's going to be an S2 introduced this week as a floor substitute. And that's going to include villages as well as making some adjustments to the funding mechanism that we see provided for us in the legislation. So just as a summary, what's different in this addition of tipping fees is rather than seeing a straight significant increase all the way up to $5 per ton from 36 cents per ton, we're looking at an increase to $1.20. And what we can reflect on from last year, legislation that actually moved during lame duck, Representative Miller had House Bill 5333 at the time, which included reimbursements going back to communities that were paying into the surcharge, as well as revenue for host communities as well. So we can anticipate that there will be a similar type of distribution structure provided to local units this time. Some conversations around maybe that being increased from what we originally have in the legislation right now at 20%. So we'll stay tuned to see what happens, especially as the Senate convenes this week for some of the last few days this summer.
All right, an interesting time as always here. There are also some developments with the municipal caucus. So would you mind reminding folks what the municipal caucus is and any news there that might be relevant for our members?
Yeah, so I could take that one. The municipal caucus is just a group of senators and representatives that have prior local government experience. So in a city or a village, it could be your city council members, mayors, the like. And it's actually a fairly significant voting block in our state legislature. You have about 36 members in both the House and the Senate. And it's really just a group that comes together and it takes on issues that are, I don't want to say low-hanging fruit, but issues that really aren't contentious, regardless of what side of the aisle you're on. So the most notable one really is the Revenue Sharing Trust Fund. It was a priority of theirs last session. They have again decided to take it on. And so in this second meeting that we had, a letter of support was introduced and the vast majority of them so far have signed on. We're confident all of them will. It's just a matter of tracking them down. They're all busy. But we've made very good progress with that group. And again, the idea there is that you have individuals who are knowledgeable about the issues and topics of most importance and interest to local units of government who can turn around in their caucus and have bipartisan support and really push those issues forward. So the Revenue Sharing Trust Fund, again, top priority. Disabled veterans property tax is another issue that they're looking at taking on again. But it's just a great group and we're happy to really do some of the legwork for them and help support their effort in that.
Thanks, Dave. And let's see, I've got a question that's come in through the chat. Tomorrow is committee hearing on RCV ballot language. Do you have any information on the league's stance on RCV?
League hasn't really taken official position on that. That's one that we're just monitoring. I mean, there's a ballot petition drive that's kind of floating around out there where they're going to be collecting signatures to try and get on the 2026 ballot as well. So really, from our perspective, we're also just monitoring it. League hasn't taken a position on that.
Thanks, Dave. All right, last but certainly not least, energy legislation. There is a lot swirling right now, from septic regulations to shoreline protections to polluter pay and more. Harrisana, can you walk us through what's on your radar and what our members should be aware of?
Yeah, sure. There's a lot going on. I think maybe we might mean environmental because there's a little bit of a switch of topics. I think energy was we were talking about earlier, but still, nonetheless, a lot going on. So I had already talked about Senate Bills 246 and 247 that deal with hazardous waste and tipping fees. Another one that we're seeing come back again is polluter pay legislation. We see Senator Irwin continuing to be a champion on this with a full package introduced in the Senate. So Senate Bills 391 through 387, 391, sorry, 86, sorry. But then also a companion package from Representative Morgan over in the House side as well. And so we have been deeply involved in polluter pay over the past several of years. Work groups have been ongoing since last year. I believe we started meeting last summer, concluded last fall. And what we have introduced now is legislation that passed the Senate during lame duck, but didn't ultimately make its way back over to the House. So a really good starting point, some things generally that we are seeing is, technically infeasible and feasibility of improving cleanup standards, improvement of transparency, which is going to be a really big one as we try to quantify how many contaminated sites are present throughout the state, and providing just a clear track record of what we can do in the sense of identifying where these spaces are, but also really bringing them up to safe standards. Obviously there's some concerns that we have around brownfield redevelopment, what types of liability are present to the local government. And in fact, they have to take ownership of a property in order to improve the health, safety, or the economic viability of an area. So those are pieces in the legislation that we're still getting our questions answered and trying to figure out. We had a hearing on these bills last week. And so just a hearing where the bill sponsors, supporters, and advocates got together, to state, how they were feeling about the legislation so far. We don't anticipate to see it coming back until the fall. So that gives us a lot of time to shop around the bill drafts or legislation that's been introduced with our members, kind of see where we ended up at the end of the year, because again, lame duck, things move really fast. These bills actually didn't have a committee hearing after improvements were taken in from the work groups. So we are really looking for that time to have some discussions and gather some feedback on where we are landing with this legislation right now. But we anticipate that it'll move through the Senate. The House might be a little bit more of an uphill battle, but both bill sponsors in each chamber have been doing a really great job connecting with stakeholders, talking about issues, and holding space for us to have a dialogue on what the impact of these bills really will be. So we likely will be talking about them all the way through the rest of the term. So stay tuned.
Stay tuned. All right. Another quick question in the chat. Did you have something to add first, Harisana?
I did not. I was going to jump to another topic, but I'll hand the veterans exemption one off to Dave.
Cool. Dave, I'll just read it out loud so folks at home know. On the veterans exemption, do you think there could be realistic relief for the communities? This started off as a $10 million unfunded mandate. It has to be close to $100 million now.
Yeah, I mean, you're hitting the nail on the head right there. So again, it started off as a $10 million expectation. Last I knew, it was well north of 85, so approaching 100 million, like stated in the comment. I do think that we could see some pretty realistic relief for the communities. It's just a matter of getting the right language that everyone is comfortable with, and that's really been the issue for the past few sessions. I think you have veteran community that's been fairly supportive and on board as of late. The question is really getting the administration, specifically Treasury, comfortable with the idea of that reimbursement shift to the back end with some kind of income tax credit rather than the locals really front loading that. So to answer the question directly, yeah, I mean, if the legislation can get through, I think we absolutely will see some meaningful relief.
Thanks, Dave. Harisana, back to you on some of those updates. What else you got for us?
Up next, I have shoreline erosion structures from Representative Andrews. So this legislation is actually very similar to what we saw from Senator Victory that he introduced during the high water event in 2019 and 2020. Simply put, this legislation helps expedite the process for residents to erect temporary structures. I should say something that is different from this time around is that it pretty much gives local residents the clearance to go ahead and put up these structures. They have to be temporary. They have to be buried under the sand. So this isn't any sort of large scale revetment that's being constructed. Contrary to what we were looking at with Senator Victory last term, that was more of an expedite of the Eagles permitting process to get those permits out. Now, what we can remember is that that was an unprecedented time. There was high water levels and waters were rising and individuals were submitting permit requests faster than the department was able to approve them and give them back. So what we're trying to do is encourage folks to be able to protect their property as needed. There are some minor tweaks that we're looking at and changing in the bill. One, we know that many of our local units already have local permitting processes for both hard revetments and soft erosion structures. So we want to make some clarifications in the bill that if there's a process already for that to be followed at the local level, then that can continue to be done. Another change that we're asking for in the bill is notification, because enforcement of this, is a little bit of a song and dance between the state departments, sometimes the county, and local law enforcement if the capacity is present. So we want to make sure that as these structures are going up, yes, we're providing a mechanism for this to happen quickly and for people to put the protections around the home that they'd like to, that we're also aware. And so notification to the local unit is something that we're trying to target and include in these bills. They had a committee hearing about 2.5 weeks ago. And so as we've talked about over the past couple of weeks, the House has been in and out, but we expect them to come back up in committee this week. And what we also heard in committee was that there was a lot of bipartisan support for this. I think rising waters has quickly turned into a nonpartisan issue since anywhere where you live could be impacted if you're along the coastline. So we have many legislative members that recall those times back in 2020 when the waters were high, and we're trying to quickly structure policy to support the outcomes of that, as well as individuals who were living right in communities where that was happening in real time. So I anticipate that this is one that could move all the way through the legislature. So we'll stay tuned on that one as well. And the last piece I have, not yet introduced, but we are starting conversations again about statewide septic code. Senator Singh has legislation that he plans to introduce, as well as he's been hosting work group conversations with the stakeholders that were present in the conversation last time. We're looking at a lot of the same things set up in the bill, but also really looking at how this is going to impact our smaller communities, our rural communities, especially as we're looking at some heavy support coming in from local health departments and some administration efforts that need to be present there as well. Just ensuring that, we have the best structure set up for folks to get, the information that they need, inspections to be done on the anticipated timeline, but we're also making sure that it's a balanced approach that our local communities and the requirements they have can meet regardless of their size and capacity. That is all I've got, Emily.
Just a quick casual update there around the environmental issues. Thank you so much, Harrisana. All right, a couple of final announcements before we wrap up to keep on your radar. First, applications are now open for our Women's Elected Leadership Intensive, a 6-week leadership development program designed specifically for women serving in local elected office. This is a great opportunity to grow skills, connect with peers, and step very confidently into leadership roles. Applications are open through July 14th, and we would love to see you apply. So we'll post that link in the comments. Second, we are delighted, thrilled, excited to announce the launch of the League's brand new online learning platform. This on-demand system gives you access to short, practical courses you can take anytime, anywhere. Perfect whether you're new to local government or looking for a refresher. Current topics include things like ethics, lobbying, local government finance, and more, and they're all available through the League portal at my.mml.org. You can enroll in individual courses or grab a 5-course bundle to dive deeper. Check it out and let us know what you think. And finally, a reminder that our annual convention is coming up September 17th through 19th in Grand Rapids. Registration opens this week. So keep an eye out and take advantage of early bird rates when they go live. That's it. A big thanks to all of our guests today, Shanna, Danielle, and of course, our State and Federal Affairs team who joined us, Dave and Harrisana for all of those important updates. Thanks to all of you for tuning in. We will see you next time on Live with the League.